But I would be very disappointed if we left today without talking about Nostr. I'm extremely excited about its potential and its possibility. So I think Moritz and Oscar, they already got a chance to know who you are. Bob and DK, maybe you can both introduce yourself outside the Lava context and in the Nostr context briefly.
Hi, Bob Scully. I'm the founder of Boardwalk Cash. Boardwalk Cash is a Bitcoin wallet that's using Nostr and eCash to make Bitcoin payments more usable. And I can talk more about, should I talk about Nostr now? Okay.
Mention your background while you're doing this.
Okay. My background, I started out as a venture investor in the payments and fintech space, led the seed round into Strike, helped Jack Mallers scale that company up over a couple of years, and then founded Boardwalk to focus on Nostr and eCash specifically because it solved a number of pain points I've seen in Lightning adoption, from remittances to merchant payments to P2P payments over the last 3 or 4 years.
DK?
Hi, I'm David King. Everybody calls me DK. I guess I'm an angel investor in a lot of kind of traditional tech and then some Nostr and Bitcoin related stuff too. I really love Nostr because it reminds me a lot of kind of growing up playing on the very early internet, where there weren't a lot of optimizations and algorithms and people were kind of just playing and having fun, and it was much more organic. And I feel like there's a little bit of a return to that I see with Nostr, and I think the structure of the architecture of the network really excites me because I think it is kind of the free speech version of social media that we've all been hoping for a long time, and you may have been promised, but I think is not really given to you. It's something that you sort of have to create. So I've been really excited about Nostr, and Max and I host every once in a while podcast whenever we're feeling up to it. So I think that's why I got invited here.
Shout out Nostr News. You can listen to it on Fountain. It's badass. Okay, so DK, that was a great sort of answer already from you why you care about Nostr. Everyone on this panel was an extremely early adopter of the protocol for 2 years plus. Maybe for the other 3 of you, can you just tell us what captured your attention about Nostr originally? Why did you decide you wanted to go so deep in 2 cases, or go to Costa Rica or Tokyo, or build the very first Nostr integrations on any service that I saw?
Sure, I'll start. So I initially got into Nostr from this like social perspective, but what most excites me and most excited me about Nostr, and why I really jumped into it, is because I saw it as a messaging layer for Bitcoin payments. So like, my view is that the Bitcoin payment stack is incomplete, and that's led to like a ton of the problems we've had in Bitcoin Lightning adoption over the last couple of years. The one thing that was missing, and once you see Nostr Wallet Connect and I saw what the Alby guys were doing, it becomes blatantly obvious that you need a messaging layer on top of a payments protocol, and that's how every other payment protocol works in the world, and they all work pretty well. And if you don't have the messaging layer on a payments protocol, it doesn't work that well. And so Nostr is that permissionless, open, interoperable payments messaging layer on top of the Lightning Network that makes it usable in apps like Fountain or Alby, and connects all of us to the Bitcoin Lightning Network via Nostr.
And for folks that maybe aren't familiar, when you say there's a messaging layer traditionally, would that be like Visa, MasterCard?
Exactly. So it's like you don't pull out your Wells Fargo account, log in, and then scan a QR code every time you want to use your Wells Fargo account. No one would do that. And so saying you have to pull out your Lightning wallet, and open the camera and then scan a QR code is like a non-starter for pretty much everybody, which is why Lightning payments option is low. But if you can auth in to your app one time, and that now that app is connected to your Lightning wallet, and then in app you can make payments, that's an experience everybody's used to, and that works perfectly well now with Nostr Wallet. It's called Nostr Wallet Connect, which is the protocol, the Nostr specific specification.
Yeah. Maybe you guys, why are you also excited about Nostr, Oscar and Moritz?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Bob around when you have payments, especially social payments that work in an app like Fountain, you need that open messaging layer to be able to do the kind of things that we're doing in a reliable way. I mean, up until now, and Moritz will know this well, we were putting the social messages within the KeySend payment TLV records, which is a bit of a stupid way to do it, to say the least. So we need this social layer, we need this messaging layer and we need this metadata layer in order to, for what we're doing, we're competing against Instagram, we're competing against YouTube, we're competing against Twitter. And in order to do that, you can't fudge messages and metadata and social data into the Lightning payment or, into some other protocol. We've looked at other things like ActivityPub and they just haven't worked for us in the podcasting world. So yeah, Nostr gives us the flexibility to be able to associate any social metadata with payments. And it's the simplicity of Nostr as well is, I think, what attracted me. It's so easy to use, it's so easy to understand. And also because it's new and nascent, it's easy to change as well. The way the NIPS repo is set up, like we had a requirement to link back to the podcast GUID scheme, which is how any podcast can keep their unique ID when they move hosting company. And we were able to get that into the spec. So it's something that, feels flexible enough that you can kind of change it and adopt it to your industry vertical. That's really important. If you compare that to ActivityPub, which is basically impossible to do that with.
Moritz?
So cannot add more to that. Yeah, super exciting there. I think the very first thing, like what got us into Nostr at Alby was like a very simple use case of signing or using private keys in order to sign into applications. We started at Alby, we started with the browser extension with the idea of providing the bridge to web apps for your Lightning payments, right? For making payments directly in a web application. And then this browser extension is a non-custodial browser extension in a sense that it only runs in your browser. There is no data exchange with a Alby organization or any other server there. So that was the sort of prerequisite to really use it as a key storage, as a key wallet, actually. So then Nostr devs reached out to us asking, yeah, guys, there is a big Bitcoin community in Nostr. There is, you have a big Bitcoin community on the browser extension. Why don't we use this and add signing functionality to the browser extension? And then we did that. And that also then coincides with a bigger hack of a Nostr client, of a web client where people lost their private keys. And
I was one of those.
Yeah, and that's why you should never paste your private keys in web applications. But you could, for example, use then a tool like a browser extension. And that's also then, again, we made the onboarding a lot easier into these Nostr clients. We could onboard a lot of new users, a lot of web apps then benefited from that. And since on, we have been also then improving really the functionality of key management, permission management within the extension as your signing device.
DK, you mentioned this reminds you of the early internet, and you see some of that excitement. Maybe we'll begin with you and then everyone. Could you paint a vision? I mean, all this stuff is very cool, but maybe sounds very abstract, kind of confusing. What are some of the kinds of product experiences that you could see a few years out that are unique to Nostr that simply cannot exist now that you personally would like to use, or of people that would like to use?
Yeah. So I think the way, when I talk about the early internet, it was a very, there were certain types of silos and BBSs and kind of corporate controlled silos. And that kind of feels like what we have today with the Instagrams and Twitters of the world. And then you sort of get to the open internet and, what was the open internet in the 90s and 2000s, and you could kind of go do anything and it wasn't very controlled. And that was like a fun time, and you could sort of explore, and it was an open blog, blogs kind of tried to network with each other, and it was a very organic, open place that didn't have a lot of top-down control and planning. And today, I think more of our lives in kind of media platforms do have that top-down control and planning. So that creates a bunch of incentives around who creates which networks, what kinds of algorithms run, how ad sales work, which also means they explicitly are not interoperable. So anybody who is able to build an Instagram or a Twitter does not want to give up the power and control that has. But that actually limits all of the kinds of experiences that could be created. And one of the ones I'm really excited about, as you know, is Highlighter. And I think it's a small picture into what the future could be like, which is, if you have apps that can be more interoperable, you could write a blog post in one app that is open to any other app that wants to sort of use that same blog post and help remix the content or help people contribute and participate in the content in ways that the original blog posting app didn't design. So you think about like a centralized blog posting tool like Medium, they don't really have kind of an open, interconnected highlighting commenting system. And we have this in private, like in a Google Doc. You don't have the ability to sort of link to other Google Docs in an open network of those things. So when you have people participating, commenting, adding notes and annotations, you can't really get those networked in any meaningful way. And it's kind of just because of like the platforms that grew up, the silos, the use cases, et cetera. But if you have the beauty of Nostr, and if you haven't used it, you should give it a try. You can download an app like Primal, and it makes it really easy to set it up. But what it does is you can create kind of a very simple identity, just like public-private key pairs, similar to how you would in Bitcoin. You don't have to ask somebody to issue it to you. You just like do math locally, like on a little calculator, and it creates it for you. And the magic of that is you can use it with any of these services, and anything you create with any Nostr service, you can actually take that content and those ideas and build new apps that use all that same content, and sort of breaks down all of the walls and silos so that we're back into that more wild version of the internet where everything was connected. You're kind of swimming through in your own way, on your own pace, figuring out what you want to do. So I think Highlighter is an example. I think it's a good example of like what you could do with if you had more interconnect between like where the blogging happens and where the commenting and highlights and annotations happen.
And maybe just for the benefit of the audience, two things I would like to clarify. So the way Nostr works, there's three things to understand that's very important. You create your identity, which is a public-private key pair. Interestingly, it's a Bitcoin key. There's going to be cool stuff with that in the future. Once you have that identity, you share notes. Most of these notes or messages are JSON blobs with 7 fields, very simple. And critically, they're signed with a private key. So you can say the owner of this pub key actually signed it. And then instead of posting to one company's server like Instagram or Twitter, you post to a free market of servers called relays. And as long as one of those servers still has your data and serves it, people can take that and build whatever experience. So I think the analogy Oscar gave earlier is fantastic. When Facebook had an open social graph or Twitter had an open API, people built things like TweetDeck on top of it. Then Twitter closes down, Facebook closes theirs down. There's a lot less that you can build. So in this case, what DK is saying is you could have a Substack as one app or a Medium, and then you could build a highlighting client to take the data from that Substack, highlight it kind of like Rat. If you guys remember that from the early 2010s, open source, open rap genius is one way to think about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the internet has the social internet has coalesced into this one experience, which is your Twitter feed. And that massively limits the kind of interesting niches that you can stumble into because it's one algorithm, it's attention driven, it's outrage driven, and that's why you see what you see on your Twitter feed. And it's because social dynamics and a social internet is way more interesting than a non-social internet. There's so many niche areas where if you could pull your social graph into it, it would be so much more valuable. Like for me, two obvious other verticals outside of podcasting are movies and also like food recipes. Like when I go to IMDb and I'm looking for a movie, like there's no social connection there because, even if they did have their internal social graph or connect to another one, I'm not going to go and ask all my friends and family to like, hey, go and connect IMDb and do all of this. It just doesn't happen. And that's why you can't find social recommendations for movies on IMDb. It doesn't work that way. And that's one example. Recipes is the same. And the ability to just bring your social graph from one of these apps to the others, I think is absolutely massive.
Yeah, books, another good one, right?
Goodreads is another one. Yeah, like Goodreads. And, we're hoping to launch audiobooks in Fountain soon. So books is particularly interesting for us. But imagine that the people that you follow, the reviews that they leave on Goodreads are available in Audible. And you can go in and you can see all of the Goodreads reviews from your followers in your audiobook app. And then also when you go back to Kindle, they're also there as well. And they're searchable, they're indexable, and there's like some clever, semantic knowledge graph that's built on top of all of them in a separate app. This is all open social data, and it can be connected across any of the different apps that we see today. And yeah, it's mind-blowing when you think about it like that. And we need more developers to come in and attack each of these verticals because there's so much opportunity. And with every new vertical, it makes all of the other verticals stronger.
I also think it's worth noting, if you haven't used Nostr, you may not be familiar with Zaps, but that's kind of a link between the Bitcoin world and this kind of free speech world, which is all of these experiences like Oscar's describing, you can do, but there's net new things you can do, which is by paying people like you can in this, streaming people sats. That actually, you could imagine a future where, instead of just getting a lot of likes on a TikTok-like platform, you could have something blow up and somebody, some kid out there makes something awesome and they make $1 million worth of Bitcoin. And imagine how much that would move the culture towards these open systems when those kinds of stories start happening. Like that, literally all the pieces are in place that could happen. Like somebody could build that and it could work. We don't have it yet, but I think that is an exciting future because it really connects something that by being open, you have the ability to connect non-custodial wallets. You have the ability to have person-to-person transactions again. And Bitcoin is a perfect fit for that. So if you're kind of excited about Bitcoin, think about the kinds of use cases that Nostr can enable for Bitcoin. That's kind of a whole design space that I think is really exciting to think about too.
And two other payments mental models that I have that I'm excited about. So one is apps don't have to integrate all of Nostr into their app. So TikTok or Facebook could actually integrate something like a Nostr Wallet Connect, enables apps, and enable Bitcoin payments without putting every single piece of data onto Nostr, and then they can selectively choose what data goes onto Nostr versus what data they might want to retain. And so you can have Bitcoin payments in all apps without necessarily having all content on Nostr. And so I think that's really interesting. And then the second is if you combine Nostr with eCash, you have this future where you can log in to your boardwalk.cash wallet, which in the backend uses Nostr, unbeknownst to the user. And then you can log in to Fountain or Primal or Highlighter. And as soon as you log in, the same eCash balance you have on Boardwalk shows up in Primal or Fountain, and you can start zapping people with the balance that you loaded on Boardwalk Cash. And so eCash works across any Nostr client using your Nostr identity as the payment layer.
And on the eCash thing, that's its whole other rabbit hole, which is fascinating. Bob is very deep on that. And we could do a whole other panel on that. Check out, talk to Bob, check out boardwalk.cash. If you're not down the cashew rabbit hole or the eCash rabbit hole, it's fascinating how much development is there. Like it's the hottest thing I've seen in, I don't know, a year at least. And they're all integrating with Nostr. I would say the Nostr community and the eCash community are kind of like one and the same at this point. So very bullish on eCash. I know Bob is as well. One question I would ask you guys, I wear two hats. One, I, like all of you, am somewhat of an activist. I really believe in this stuff. I really want this world to happen, and I'm doing everything I can to make it happen. On the other hand, I'm an investor, and being a good investor means seeing reality as it is and finding the wave, making sure you're there on the wave, and making sure we make a lot of money from the wave. Two questions around that. The first question is, how would you respond to people, being very intellectually honest and say, look, Nostr is great, but you've got 40,000 or so weekly active users, probably higher than that if you count reads. That's great, but it's not like absolutely exploding yet. There are some other networks that claim to be decentralized, things like a Bluesky or ActivityPub or Mastodon, that have a lot more users as of today, or at least that's what they're reporting. How would you explain to someone why you're so bullish in betting on Nostr? Any of you can start.
I think that we looked at all of these options within the podcasting 2.0 community, because what we're trying to do is, without thinking about any specific technology or protocol, we're trying to achieve cross-app podcast comments so that someone can leave a comment on an episode and someone else can reply on a different app. We've been trying to do this for about 2 years now. And we looked at ActivityPub, we looked at these other protocols, and just none of them had that capability and that flexibility in order to do that. And so I think we just need to highlight that more for developers. There's probably so many developers out there that have this idea in their head to make their app more social, but they've looked at ActivityPub and it doesn't really work. So I think it's just a question of getting Nostr into the hands of developers and demonstrating it, and then you'll see more and more apps that have existing user bases adopt Nostr, and then that will increase the total usage.
I agree with Oscar here. I think it's really like the developer experience and the ease of developing on top of Nostr, because it's open, because it's like a list of rather simple specifications like these NIPs, that make it so appealing to developers compared to like more closed system like Bluesky, for example, because there you just don't know what will happen, right? They can shut down APIs also, and what will happen with your app then. And we see very weird also experiments, people building a meetup application on Nostr, people building some like streaming services on Nostr. So it's the experimental space is huge there, which is very interesting. And I think what we need to get across is that there is more than just the social media application use case to Nostr. A lot of these apps started off like this, cloning Twitter, Facebook, but yeah, these apps, they started like 10, 15 years earlier. They have certainly an unfair advantage right now, and competing with them is extremely hard, I think, but there are tons of other use cases for the Nostr protocol itself. It does not need to be just like a full-fledged like short form. There can be other things, right? And I think that's what we need to tell them.
Yeah, I think in my mind, it comes down a lot to the neutrality of it. So I think when you look at, Bluesky, just as an example, you can actually get, because it has like VC backing around the protocol and a team bootstrap that kind of works on it full time from day one, and they can go out and market it. They actually can get a lot of traction early with some, influencers and people who have bigger audiences. And so I think that's like an example of a fairly centralized system that aspires to be more decentralized and grassroots. I think it's kind of like this phrase, like it's almost like if you want to go fast, go centralized, and if you want to go far, go decentralized. And when I say decentralized, people can quibble about the definition of that, but I think the neutrality is really what it is. I think Nostr is very neutral. Now, the downside is nobody really runs it, controls it. It's kind of chaos. Like, it's very Bitcoin-like.
It is chaos.
But it also has the neutrality that I think can enable it to become the one that everybody uses, whereas anyone that has some whiff of non-neutrality, I think ultimately will get very pigeonholed into the thing that it got good at when it started. So I think it's the neutrality that really sells me on it.
Cool. Two other questions around that. One is business model. As you think, right now Nostr is beautiful. The subsidy that we're giving to the world for having free information, the ability to build all kinds of apps, incredible. We're also obviously investors and entrepreneurs. How do you think about the same question Mark's asked earlier? How do we think about potential business models? How do we one day make money in Nostr?
I can start, but feel free to jump. There's a lot of different philosophies on this. I think a lot of the client side stuff is how value was captured in the centralized version. So if you sort of build the Twitter client, you control the database, you control the whole thing, you control the ad experience. So I think the client portion of it is where a lot of minds go toward, that's what to build to be valuable. But because of the structural differences between kind of the old style centralized systems and a decentralized system, I think the kind of open source client stuff is more likely to be like the best marketing channel for other services. But I think you have to figure out what are the other services that those open source kind of clients can build and touch that may have some closed source or white glove service associated with them. In my mind, those could be things like enterprise software. Like if Nostr is only 40, 50,000 weeklies or whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's not worth going after the enterprise. But if these clients drive more adoption, drive more usage, and now there's millions of people who use this all the time, there's going to be enterprise needs around how they represent themselves in these public spaces and how they integrate with messaging. And similar to how you've seen in open source, there's great open source software models where you create a free project, everybody uses it, and you say, hey, you can use it for free, but we make it easier and we have this white glove service with customer support and all that, and you pay us for it. And I think that's a fine business model that I would suspect it's more likely that kind of businesses work like that instead of there's a ton of direct monetization on the open source client side.
I also think the combination of Nostr and Bitcoin payments unlocks a lot of new business models where the money is in the protocol, which is really cool. And you can split that money. You can send micropayments. You can split the money 1,000 different ways if you want, all in like a millisecond. And so when we talk about some of the AI and a lot of the growth in like computer-to-computer payments, I think a lot of that will run on the combination of Nostr and Bitcoin or eCash in the future as well. And that unlocks, it enables anyone to accept payments, and there's no fraud, and you don't need a payments team, and you don't got to go through like arbitration on some payment that charge back. And so I think that unlocks all of these micro entrepreneur, micro payment, and micro marketplace opportunities that don't exist at all with the web.
I think there's two parts to it for me. I think there's, in many ways, building a Nostr client is exactly the same as building any other product that people pay for. You need to deliver something that's valuable so that they pay for your product. We have a premium subscription for listeners. And if we make the listener experience more valuable, then more of our users will pay for that subscription. We think Nostr enables that because it provides better discovery for episodes. And then on the creator side, if we can help content creators grow their audience and get paid, then they're going to be willing to pay us for the tools that enable that as well. And that's in many ways no different to the existing, creator platforms that exist like Patreon. So that's like the basics. And I think just Nostr enables us to build a better product. And then in the more long term, I think the micropayments is where there's really interesting kind of new monetization, mechanisms where, you've talked about the curation of content where, you can have a podcast and you're a DJ and there's multiple music tracks in the podcast. And then when someone's listening, every minute they're sending a micropayment and that money's being split out to the DJ, the artist, maybe like the person that shared that with the most people in the app. So I think having micropayments in a more long-term sense is going to enable some really cool new monetization options.
Okay, final question. This one is hopefully an interesting question because I don't know the answer to this one. I go back and forth on this all the time, so I'm very curious to get your takes. Does Bitcoin bring more people to Nostr, or does Nostr bring more people to Bitcoin?
Definitely Nostr brings more people to Bitcoin because micropayments are really fun. They add a lot of value to social experiences on the internet. See this with Stacker News. I mean, it's so much better because it has payments in it. It's actually a better product. And we just need to make it easy for people to try out these social experiences without having to go through KYC to acquire those first 50 cents or $1 that's required to, upvote a post on Stacker News or zap someone on Nostr. If we can do that, then I think we've already proved that the product experiences that enable micropayments are way better than the existing comparisons without micropayments. It's just we have such an onboarding challenge for that user base to acquire their first sats. I mean, the retention of users within Fountain that send a payment to a podcaster is amazing. if we could get all users over that hurdle to send their first payment, we would, the growth would be incredible. The reason it's challenging for us is because we partner with MoonPay, and MoonPay is it's an on-ramp that's designed for people to go and invest, a significant amount. When you think about social applications that use micropayments, we need to rethink the onboarding to Bitcoin, the onboarding to Sats. And if we can do that, then I think we're going to have, some social apps. Hopefully Fountain is one of them, that bring in millions and millions, hundreds of millions of users to Bitcoin. And they won't even necessarily know that's Bitcoin. As I said before, they'll just think of it as Sats, and they'll just think of it as podcast money, or, whatever other vertical money.
Yeah, I agree with Oscar here. So I think in the beginning it's probably like a lot of Bitcoiner that were already into Bitcoin moved over also to Nostr. But if you use Facebook, Instagram, and their user base as a proxy to more or less say, okay, we can rebuild all that also on Nostr, then definitely we will see more of these, more Nostr users coming to Bitcoin because of that, because they are just, the user base on these social media apps is bigger than on these like exchanges, fintech apps that include exchange services.
How many people are there in the world that have purchased V-Bucks on Fortnite? I don't actually know the answer to that.
Well, a lot.
But there's probably a lot.
Probably more than Bitcoin.
I think Nostr is a lighter weight way to engage with this ecosystem. So it's not so serious. You can kind of play around. And I think that gives it a benefit over Bitcoin, or an advantage over Bitcoin. But I think it lacks something that's very important that Bitcoin has, and that is number go up technology. There is no number go up technology associated with Nostr yet, right? And I think there are, we haven't had a lot of creative work in that area yet, but I do think it can be done. And I think if it is done, that will attract a lot of attention for that purpose, which will drive in a whole set of people who may not care about store of value or payments, but they want to participate in something new that they believe can drive returns for them. I think it's a very natural, kind of human instinct to drive attention toward those kinds of things. So I think we need to collectively pay attention to those incentives and figure out where they can be incorporated into Nostr.
I go back and forth on that answer like every week. Interestingly, the product I'm building, the goal is the user doesn't know they're using Nostr or Bitcoin. And so they don't know either. You're just picking the best user experience and the best technology that each of those protocols offers and building it into the user experience. So hopefully 8 billion people will not even really know.
8 billion people and 8 trillion machines. That's what we're aiming for. On that note, with what DK said as well with number go up, I did just do a very quick glance. Stacker News has a very convenient price ticker up there, and it said it was just a few dollars below at the moment. I'm assuming it touched a little bit above that. Depending on whose data source you use, I believe the last all-time high was around 73K. Maybe it was 74K, but that's close enough for me to declare that. By the end of Hivemind LP Day, we did hit a new all-time high number go up. So thank you guys so much. That was an amazing panel. Thank you all so much for coming out. This was an incredible day.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Max.
We've reached the end of our day, so please, over the next 5 minutes, collect your things. We do have to get out of here. It was very nice for Mark to let us use this. We are going to head across the street to Digital Garage for those that want to hang out. At 4:30, there's a BitDevs for those that want to go to that. For those that just want to chill, you can see, keep the conversation going at Digital Garage. And there will be a hackathon later that starts, I think, around 6:30. So thank you all so much for coming. It's been fun.